When you're 95 years old, will you regret not taking the adventurous decision? So that's been a lens that I've used when I come to making hard life choices is what will my future self think about this? Work and life should be integrated so that who you are at your work is something that is the same person as in your life.
Welcome back to Care Beyond Profits. I'm Azura Ali, and in this interview, I'm very excited to be joined by Steven Moe. Steven is a partner at Parry Field Lawyers, and he's also the host of Seeds podcast. We dive into Steven's childhood journey from across countries to shifting mindsets that opened his doors. We also talk about how he found purpose and transitioned from a commercial career to a more impactful career. If you've ever wondered how do you turn challenges into opportunities in both career and community, then this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. If this speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. Let's get into it. Steven, I'm so pleased to have you on the show. It's a real privilege to have you. Welcome to the show.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Steven. Before we dive in, I just wanted to tap into the you behind the scenes. So if I was to come to your house on a Saturday afternoon, what would I be feeling, hearing, and seeing?
Well, I think you'd be hearing a lot of laughter and children's voices and activities and games. I have 4 children, ages between 10 and 17. So you can imagine that there's a lot of activity. And they might have friends over or they might be outside playing games. So weekends are pretty busy for us. There's always some sort of a birthday party, Uber driving, drop off here, pick up there. But as well, I would hope that I would have time in that day to go maybe to a secondhand bookstore, looking for old books. I love, reading. So there might be a bit of relaxing and sitting by currently in the winter by a warm fire as well.
And what shaped your love for reading there? Did you pick that up over time, or how did you get into that?
I've always loved reading. Even when I was a little boy, it was like a nice present to get at my birthday or Christmas. It'd be like, oh, I got a nice book. And what I've come to love about books is that it's a direct connection with people who may not even be alive anymore. So you can have a mentor who was alive in the 18th century and you can read, David Copperfield, Charles Dickens, and it's this whole world that gets created and it transports you there. Or maybe Lord of the Rings, a fantasy sci-fi sort of world, or maybe a children's book. And all of these things are ways to transport ourselves into other ways of thinking and being. So I really love the power of books. And then I've also written books since that early love. So I've written a children's book, but it's really for the adults who are reading it to their children. So yeah, it's something that's always been with me.
Thank you, Steven. And that's really interesting about teleportation. If you were to teleport yourself back to your childhood, I wonder what Steven would have looked like back then and what was he up to back then?
It depends what year we're talking about, because my father had an unusual job. He is a marine biologist, which meant that we were moving around a lot. So I was born in America, which is the reason for my accent. So the first 7 years I was in Eugene, Oregon on the West Coast. But then we moved to New Zealand, to Aotearoa, down in Otago on the Waitaki River in a small rural place, only a couple people, at the school. And then we moved to Chile in South America and we were there for a year and then back to America and then eventually back to New Zealand. So it kind of depends what age we're talking about. But at 13, I moved to Christchurch and that's where I had my high school years. So I would say my identity would be, despite having this accent, would be as a Christchurch-based person. And it's where I live now.
Thank you, Steven. Was there anything in your early days that if you were to look back would surprise yourself about where you are right now today?
I think looking I think honestly, it was a reflection of what was to come. So when I was 21, I moved to Japan and I lived there for a year. And then later on, I lived in London for 4 years, and I've lived in Sydney for 4 years, back in Japan for 4 years. And so my whole life has been one of moving around. I've lived in 6 different countries for more than a year. So that early childhood, I would say, is probably a sign of what was about to happen as well in my adult life.
And in terms of when you were moving around, where were your parents at the time?
Well, we were all together up until I was later, when I was 21, I was going on my own. I taught English in Japan. And so that was a decision that I was making as, a young adult, making my own decisions. Yeah, but as a family, we traveled a lot. And I think it meant that our family was quite close knit because we were going to countries where, at that time, I didn't speak Spanish when we moved to Chile. And we're moving to rural New Zealand. We don't know anybody in the country. So I think it gave me a sense of resilience. It's in a way an immigrant experience of moving to a new place and having to learn and adapt. And, this is back in the 1980s. So New Zealand back then was quite different even to today. An exotic thing was maybe the fish and chips shop rather than Thai food or Indian food. Particularly in rural Otago, it was quite different to what it is now.
And in your early experience moving here and transitioning with all of that, how did you find Stephen transforming? Could you talk us through a little bit about what that life looked like and how you started your career there?
So I think I've been really lucky because my parents were models to me of caring about community and thinking about others. So they had been volunteers in something called the Peace Corps. And the Peace Corps was set up way back in the 1960s by John F. Kennedy, the president at the time. So they were volunteers when they were in their early 20s and they had lived in South America. So I think I grew up with this ethos of like giving back, and it's not just about how much money you make. And that really has been something that's echoed, particularly the work I do now as a lawyer. I support many, many charities and for-purpose organizations. But to answer that question, I think a really instrumental time for me was moving to Japan when I was 21. And I had a whole bunch of people say, you're halfway through your degree, finish your degree, get a job, start paying off a mortgage. That's what you should be doing. And I had other people, my father included, who said, when you're 95 years old, so we're getting towards the end, will you regret not taking the adventurous decision? Will you regret not going to Japan? And I thought I probably would regret it. So that's been a lens that I've used when I come to making hard life choices is what will my future self think about this? And is it something I should do even though it's difficult or I don't yet speak Japanese? I'm still going to make that choice. So that was really pivotal in my life.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it in terms of the future, because some of us, can easily fall back into the current and then our minds can play a lot of games on us. So was there any mindset shifts that you had to take because you've been to so many different countries, so many different places? And we'll also touch on the fact that you actually came from a very commercial background, and the work now that you do also took quite a bit of mindset shifts. So starting with that first question of the mindset shift, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I've had a few mindset shifts over my life, and I think that this is a really encouraging thing to realize, particularly if anybody is listening and maybe they're a young person and thinking about what they'll do in their life. So I just finished a little book actually called The Circle: Careers with Impact, which I'm happy to give as a free resource for anybody. We can put it as a link. And there's some reflections in there on these topics. One of the key ones is what I've said to you is, what will my end of life person think about my choice today? Because bound up with this, of course, is at a funeral, nobody talks about how much money was in the person's bank account or what was their degree or job title. It's all about people and relationships. So everything gets stripped away by our mortality. So it's better to realize that at the beginning and start planting seeds in areas that actually matter, rather than thinking that wealth accumulation, that's the current thing that society is like, that's what you got to aim for. But it's not actually, at the end of your life, that's not what's going to matter. So that's been a big mindset shift for me. Another big mindset shift is the idea of work-life balance. So oftentimes when you're talking with someone, they'll say, how's your work-life balance going? And you might have asked that yourself. But I think it's the wrong conception, because what it's doing is saying work is a bad thing that I only do to live my life. Life is what I like doing. Work is a necessary evil thing. And I think that's such a limited view of what work can be, because I think work and life should be integrated, so that who you are at your work is something that is the same person as in your life. In other words, your work is a big part of your life, not the most important part. Your identity needs to be based on something other than what's on my business card. But it should be, your work should be something that brings you joy, that brings you a sense of satisfaction. And I think for lots of people, including somebody listening right now, they might be saying, I wish that was the case, but I really am only working to get enough money to have holidays or to have something outside. Let's change that conception. Let's look at our work as being something that, if we can find it's a fulfilling thing, we're giving back, we're actually getting paid to do it, that transforms our lives. So that would be another big conception that's changed for me. Instead of viewing work as I have to do it, now I view it as I get to do it. I have a joy that comes from the work that I do.
That's so powerful there, Stephen. And how did you, for those listening, how did you find your purpose? What was that like, and how did you actually fall into where you are right now?
It took hard work and effort. So that's one thing I want to emphasize, is that you can't just assume that life is going to hand you the ideal role on a plate. Like, you don't have to do anything. What you need to do is reflect, think about who you are, what brings you joy. The picture I like to give people is, imagine a bell. If you had a little, not a big one, just a bell, if you were to strike the bell, it could be heard for many, many hundreds of meters away. Like, it's ding, everyone can hear it. But if you put the bell on the ground and strike it, no one will hear it. So that's a little bit like our lives and our work. We need to have lifted it up, and then when we strike our work and our lives, it will resonate out for others. So I think the first part of my career, it was more like the bell was on the ground. I wasn't really feeling fulfilled. I was doing mergers and acquisitions and helping wealthy people get even wealthier. And what I realized was 10 years ago, I was 39, about to turn 40. And so I had this little epiphany of like, oh, life is going by. I'm about to turn 40. It's actually a good moment. Those decade birthdays are good moments to reflect. And I thought, maybe I could reinvent my career, take everything that I've learned, don't throw anything away. Everything is useful. But could I reinvent my career as a lawyer to be supporting for-purpose organizations and charities, community groups, sports groups, religious groups? Like, I support all of them. And so that's been a deliberate strategic shift that I want to get into it. The next question is, how did you get into it? You start writing about the topic that you want to get more work in. You start putting out a book about social enterprise or charities, or if that's what you want to do, or whatever the topic is. Start meeting people who are already experts in that area. Start a podcast. Reach out to people and say, would you be on my podcast? I did that. I have a podcast called Seeds, and I've now spoken to 452 inspiring people. So that's a lot of people I've met through my podcast. And I applaud
Mm.
what you're doing. It's a great way to get to know somebody. So the point is, you have to be proactive and strategic to imagine a future of what you'll be doing 10 years or 20 years from now, and then do the building blocks so that you're set up to become that type of person in the future.
That's very powerful, Stephen. And I think often we stay in the place that we're in because we're so scared about fear of the unknown. And you've navigated that so well through your career and through all of the causes that you're in. And you're also part of not just the professional environment, but you also do a lot of faith-based work and outside. So can you tell us a little bit more about your faith? And I'd love to dive into some of those value sets and where did that come from?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's something that I think is really important. I think in the past, when people talked about faith, it was seen as kind of a negative thing. But for me, I find it's really interesting. If you use the word spiritual, people are more open to that concept or that idea. And I think the reality is that at the core of us as human beings, there's probably a recognition that, a little bit like what I was talking about, that we are mortal, that we will not live here forever, that we have a limited time, and that goes by. So you start inevitably asking questions about, like, well, what is life? What am I, just a sort of, a bit of creature that crawled out of a swamp and evolved to somehow have an awareness? And is that it? Is that all that I am? So I think there's a greater understanding these days that there are spiritual dimensions beyond the physical, beyond sort of what you and I can see. And you also see that in indigenous cultures, and particularly here in Aotearoa. If you look at Te Ao Māori, there's a very, very strong sense of, there's a spiritual dimension here. There's something going on beyond just the words on a page, and I think that people would be open to that thinking about a spiritual side. And all you have to do is go for a walk in a forest, or sit beside a river, or be on a lake, or there's so much examples out there that you have to question, is there something more? So for me, it's about a conversation about what is spirituality, what is a spiritual dimension to life. And when I was 21 and I moved to Japan, I actually had an experience where people made assumptions about me because I have blue eyes and I'm European. And so they made assumptions and it was a basic assumption, which is, you're a Western person, therefore you must be a Christian. And that was a conception that people had, which was based on a cultural understanding. So I had a question when people would say, "Oh, well, you're from New Zealand. You must be a Christian." I had to ask myself, what do I believe? What is it at the core of who I am in terms of what I think? And that was really a time as an adult to come and understand that actually I need to investigate these things for myself. I need to not rely on what other people have told me and read books about, and actually go back to things like source material. So for me, I am a Christian, but that's something that only became really meaningful to me when I was questioned as to what that meant, when I was, like I say, about 21, 22. But that faith has now guided me and has helped me in understanding the role that I play. And it's a basic thing, but there's many spiritual principles which are illustrated by parables. So seeds being planted is one. If I plant the seed, the crops will grow. And that's in a spiritual sense, but also in a physical sense and in a relationship sense. So for me, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I wanted to give the answer enough reflection to explain how I've come to have faith and how that's important to me.
And do you think that it's important for everyone to reflect on our own spiritual, whatever that might be? How do you think, if someone's going through a phase of they're unsure, they don't have clarity, there's a lot of fog. How do you think they can uncover some of that for themselves?
I think it's vital and essential. I actually am encouraging people I knew who are finishing high school to take a gap year and to not rush into study, because I think there's so much societal expectation, kind of like what I was saying before, that you just get
Mm.
out, you get a job, you start working. I think we need to spend a bit more time reflecting and sitting beside rivers and letting the sun shine on our face and talking to people and investigating for ourselves so that we can come to understand. Many people may have grown up within a faith environment or have people that maybe they've looked to, but I think the essential thing is to come back and understand for yourself. So in my case, that involved going back to the source material and reading things like in the Bible, not books about it, but actually the words themselves. And so for me, that was an important part of coming to understand what does a relationship with God look like? Not relying on what others told me, but actually understanding for myself. So that's been quite a big learning, through my life, but been a big part that's now helped me and given me focus and energy to do what I do.
That's a really good topic there to transition into, focus and energy, because all through our lives, we're constantly, battling with the number of things going on in our lives. And at the moment, with the internet age, I think a lot of us get fed so much. And there's a lot of scroll happening in all of our lives. We get fed with so much social media. For those listening, what are some things, and I really want to deep dive into you as a person, Stephen, and not what's out there. So what do you do to be focused and energized on a daily basis while you're juggling? You're a father, you have so many different places that you're working at. So what are 3 key things that you would do on a daily basis to keep yourself grounded?
I think this sounds really basic, but you can't ignore sleeping well, eating well, and exercising. So, what I find is that if I haven't had enough sleep, if I'm not eating well, if I'm not exercising, I'm not going to be able to perform as well. So, that takes a bit of discipline to say, actually, I need to go to bed now. Like I'm not going to stay up and finish binge watching that Netflix show. And same with eating, what is it that's coming into my body? Is it nutritious, or am I, eating crackers or McDonald's or whatever? So that's important. And for me, actually, you didn't ask this, but it's relevant. I've actually stopped drinking alcohol in the last year and a half. So I find that gives me a lot more energy, because alcohol actually, it sucks it away. I'm not sure if people realize this, but it's a temporary feeling, but actually it's not great for your body. And also your body adapts to the amount that you're drinking. So over time, you feel like you need to have more to get the same feeling that you had previously. And then the final thing is the exercise. When you get stressed, you automatically think, I don't have time to exercise. In fact, that's a signal that you should be exercising more, because if you're not doing that, you're probably going to be stressed and more hyped up. And so your body actually needs that release. It might just be going for a walk. It doesn't have to be like a long marathon run or something. But for me, I have rhythms in my life now. So for example, on a Sunday morning, I will go to the gym and have a really, hour session. On a Tuesday morning, so we're recording this on a Tuesday, I've got an hour and a half or so where I go to the gym. I blocked it in my calendar. So it's just like a meeting, but that's my time to do that. And then usually Thursday or Friday, I'll try to do a run or do something else as well. So I'm very deliberate about that, as being important. So that's the health and the eating and the sleeping. The other thing that I've really learned to do is to, wherever I can, delegate to other people. So sometimes we take things on thinking that we have to do it all, but that's actually not a good sign of leadership. A good sign of leadership is that you're able to empower others to step in and be able to learn and upskill so that you're not even needed anymore. So it's a great joy to me and my team. I've got about 15 people I work with. If I can say to one of them, I've been asked to speak at this conference, but I think you're ready to do it. Can you do it instead? Like that's real leadership, I think, is to allow others to be involved in, what you're doing. So those are some of the tips and tricks from my perspective.
Thank you, Stephen. And you've navigated a life where, obviously, with having 4 children, you've had to juggle this. So, for those listeners that are out there trying to get through their careers, juggling leadership roles, whether it be C-suite executive roles or whatever that leadership role looks like at this point in time,
Yeah.
what could you say? And we talked a little bit earlier on about work-life balance, but as a parent, what could you say are some things and tips that you would share with them from your experience?
From my experience, that urgent client matter that you think is so important, in 10 years, you're going to have forgotten who they were. So it's about prioritizing your family and your children. Don't make them second in line. I don't always do this well, but I try to be focused on my kids if I'm with them, not, and this is a temptation, on my phone, checking my messages. So last night I got home, my 10-year-old is there, and I've had a long day. What I really feel like doing is sitting in the couch with my phone, scrolling, just, not having to engage. But he was like, Dad, can we play Rubik's Match, which is like Rubik's Cube, but you match up the colors. And so I had a choice. Am I going to get off the couch and go play this game? Or am I going to say, no, I don't want to play? And I chose to go play. So that's solidifying a memory for him with that in the future. I care about what he'll think when he's 30 and he's talking about his childhood. I want him to be able to say, I never felt like my dad was distant or removed because he was always busy with work. I remember we used to sit down on the floor and we'd play games when I asked him, or we went on the trampoline, or we went swimming. So I think it's important because, like I say, that urgent client who has the demand on you, you will have forgotten their name in the future, but you will not have forgotten your child's name. So where's your priority? Who are you being present for? And I think you have to prioritize your family over the work things.
Have you ever felt like there was an enough for you when you've been juggling through things in your day? And what did enough look like for yourself? And how did you tell yourself that that's enough?
I think for me, I'm somebody who does, like we've mentioned some of my projects, but I do like to have a large number of projects on the go. So I'm writing a paper right now on nature as shareholder. I'm doing Seeds podcast. I have another podcast on governance for the IOD. I'm finishing off a book, which is fictional, set in the future. I've just finished this nonfiction book on careers with impact. And also I'm got my team, like about 15 people that we're doing legal work. I've got clients that need support. So I like to have a lot on the go. But for me, that's not draining. It's actually energy giving. So I've chosen the types of things that give me energy. Writing a fictional book set in the future about how I think the world might look if we lose our sense of wonder. To me, it's like it fills me up with a sense of joy, so that's really important. But also, I think it's important to take time out for ourselves. So once a month, this Friday, actually, I'm planning to take a day off and probably go to a river or a lake or something and just be on my own, chance to decompress and reflect. Whatever urgent message there is will be waiting for me when I get back. So prioritizing your own self and making sure that you're getting time to reflect on what you're doing, what your priorities are. And frankly, when you get a friend or somebody who has cancer and doesn't have much longer, I interviewed someone for my podcast. We knew they were about to be gone. So it changes your perspective on what's my priorities in life. I had somebody put this really well recently. If you knew that you only had 4 years left, would you live your life differently? And I'd like to think that I wouldn't because I'm doing the things, but it's a really interesting framing of the question. Like 4 years is long enough to do the bucket list things, but also probably you need to be working or, engaging. But what are you doing today that at the end of 4 years, you look back and, man, I binge watched 25 Netflix series, but I don't even remember what it was about. As opposed to, I mentored and supported 5 young people who are now establishing their careers and they're starting their families. Like that to me is more worthy.
What impact are you creating in this world, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I'll send you, if you send me your address, I'll send you a little book I wrote on, it's called The Apple Tree. And it's all about the seeds that we plant and the fact that we may not see the trees that grow. We may never sit in the shade of those trees, but we need to be planting the seeds about what matters. So yeah, I'll send you a copy.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Steven.
That's the book there.
Lovely. I'd love to read it. Thank you.
It's a picture book, but yeah, for adults. So yeah.
Love picture books. My children love reading as well. So I've got 2 little ones, and yeah, we spend a lot of time, as you record, about the keeping the screens away, and
they'll like
they'll love it. They'll love
it. Yeah.
Thank you, Steven. And I'd love to dive in a little bit more about impact and the challenges now from your work side, because obviously a lot of the listeners listening in today, they will be looking through their lens of work and how can we create better impact. One of the things that I do is work with a lot of CEOs and founders, and sometimes it's in the for-purpose sector, sometimes it's actually really driven entrepreneurs trying to make a difference in this life, and both have a lot of purpose and meaning. And one of the things that keep coming up is when they're getting started and they've got 10 different things going on, there's a lot of challenges. And what is the one advice that you would give them in terms of building from scratch, but also balancing life?
It's actually really simple. And particularly if you're dealing with founders, what is your purpose? You have to be clear and be able to articulate it. Some people call this the elevator pitch. Like if you got in an elevator and you had 15 seconds to tell people what you do, can you do that? But I think it's vital for whether it's a charity or a business or anything, being clear on your purpose is so essential. And as a legal perspective, I would also encourage people to be putting it in their founding documents. So if you're a company, start with your mission and your purpose in your constitution. Don't start with definitions and boring things. Start with, we exist to do this. 1, 2, 3. What is it? Because if you can be clear on your purpose, if you can communicate it well, you're going to attract the right employees, the right customers. You're going to be able to convey the image of what it is that you're here to do. Probably some of the listeners would have heard of Simon Sinek and his question, start with why. Like, why do we do this? And I think it's really important. Don't get stuck up on the how and the what we do. Get back to the why. So particularly for founders, I meet a lot of founders and they've got some vague ideas and conceptions and they've got a name. But if I push them, like really push them, they might have a 15-page document. But what's the bullet point 2 to 3 core of what you do? Make sure you're very clear on that. And I think if you're clear on that, it will then give you energy because you'll be able to articulate it and return to it if you're faced with distractions. Steve Jobs talked about focus, and he said, focus isn't just looking at the one thing that you should look at. It's saying no to the hundreds of other things that are temptations to look at. So that, to me, there's some wisdom there, like stay focused on your purpose.
And if you were to look at Steven when he started his career, given that you've just written a book and it's out, can you tell us what advice would you give Steven, who was, say, 20 years old, starting his early career?
Well, I think this is a great question. And my answer is, of course, you have to go through everything to become the person that you are. I think I was realizing it back then because of my experience in Japan. But the biggest advice that I give to graduates is be proactive and ask, how can I add value to every situation? So if somebody asks you to do some research or to write a memo or to do whatever it is, do the work, but then go above and beyond, add value in everything you do. So if I give a new graduate a research assignment, like, can you please prepare a memo on this topic? What I'm hoping they'll do is they'll prepare the memo, and the memo will be really good. But then they'll say, as well as the memo, I was thinking that you're going to need a cover email attaching the memo. So I went ahead and prepared the cover email. And then you didn't mention this to me, but as I was researching, I noticed that there's another issue which I think would be relevant for this particular client. So I've gone ahead and prepared a short summary of that issue so that we can provide that to them as well. Like that, to me, that's adding value. And a lot of people that I talk to say, I'm not a leader, like that's not my role. But my encouragement is to think, this is another conception, everyone is a leader of at least one person, yourself. So you have to lead yourself well. And you might be at the, in the hierarchy tree, you might be way down here. You just started. Doesn't matter. Lead yourself well. Be proactive. Add value. Don't worry about job titles. That will come because you'll be recognized. People love if somebody is adding value, and clients love it too. If you can go above and beyond what you're asked and help them on their journeys, then you'll be fine.
And why is it so important for those listening here to think of themselves as a leader, even if they're not so high up in the ladder?
Well, I see it as almost a kind of an excuse is, well, I'm just here to collect my paycheck, the 9 to 5. I'm junior IT assistant, whatever it is. But I think that if you want to progress and grow, then you need to be curious and you need to be adding value in everything you do. So my challenge is become the type of person that you would like to meet. So I'm talking, this is decades long exercise. Like, you are your own project. You're probably the most important project that you'll ever have. How do I improve Steven to be the best possible version of Steven Moe? And everyone's going to be different. Everyone has different abilities and desires and everything, but we should treat ourselves as, how can I improve who I am? Because we are each becoming someone. Every day, there's micro decisions that we're making, which are leading to us becoming either this version of ourselves or this version of ourselves. So I'm trying in my decisions to become the type of person who is empathetic, who is curious, who asks questions, who adds value, rather than it's all about me. Look at how much money I made. I'll help you, but you have to help me first. The type of person, and it might be as simple as, I really think people who can speak more than one language, that's an amazing thing. Well, you can learn another language. Start learning Te Reo Māori or Spanish or French or, whatever the language is. You can become a person who speaks 2 or 3 or 4 or more languages. And so if we approach our lives like that, it's about realizing that we are becoming someone, and we have to take proactive steps to become the best version of that someone.
And the more we give, the more we get. It's a whole cycle, isn't it?
Yeah,
Steven,
that's right.
Thank you. You've spoken so much about advice that you're giving others. I want to dive into a couple of challenges in your own life at the moment. We shared a lot on the challenges around your previous Steven, and now the challenges that you're navigating. So one challenge you're happy to share with the audience and how you're going about it right now.
I think maybe a challenge for me is that there are multiple opportunities, and so it's learning to say no in a graceful way. So I have to be careful not to get too stretched. So that's something that I'm navigating, because I basically like to say yes to people like this. If someone approaches me and says, hey, would you come on this show? Then I'll usually say, yes, absolutely. And I was really excited to come and be able to speak with you. But I have to be careful not to just say yes to everything. So that's a challenge that I face, I think. The other challenge that I face, if I'm being totally vulnerable and honest, is that I have an international family. So my parents don't live in New Zealand. They're living in another part in America. So it's a challenge as they're getting older. What's my role as a son to support and be with my parents? How do I do that well? If they're going through a health challenge or something like that. So that's something that I'm kind of navigating. And it's really tricky for international families because, it's just hard. You can't just sort of pop around with some food. It's like it would be at least a 10-hour flight to get to be able to see you. So that's something that I guess I'm navigating as well. And maybe the final thing is our team is growing. So there's lots of different people, different dynamics, different delegations, and making sure that we're on top. We're basically the leading law firm for purpose-driven organizations and entrepreneurs, which is wonderful. And we just opened our Auckland office and we have about 100 people. But with that comes lots of, but with that comes lots of, needing to travel a bit and going to Auckland and meeting people in person. And so there's a bit of extra time that's required. So I guess navigating some of those things is what is challenging for me right now.
And looking ahead, what is your biggest, I guess, one big goal?
I hope to continue to bring creativity into everything that I do. So I'm about to release this paper called Nature as Shareholder. And I got an amazing watercolor artist named Lily Duval. And so she has provided beautiful drawings of insects and trees and lizards. And I'm putting them into my quite legal document, but it's a beautiful document because it's got these watercolor images of nature. And then I'm talking about what would it mean if nature owned shares in a company? So quite an interesting question. Like it's a world leading question that nobody's really thought about. So it's fun to be at the forefront of edges of thinking about things. But I also just really enjoy people and helping them. And, founders, for example, if they need to talk about legal structures, I always tell people I've got a 20-minute commute every day. I would rather talk to somebody who needs some help than listen to the radio. And that's a legitimate offer, including for you or others, like if you want to talk legal structures, we've helped 40 or 50 charities set up in the last year alone. So we're very active in that area.
It's a really good way to look at it. Make the most of a commute, isn't it?
No time needs to be wasted time. If you're commuting, then my view is you should be listening to a podcast, something that you can learn from. You should be calling that person that you keep meaning to call, but you never quite get around to it. You should be using your time not in I have to sit in traffic, but instead in I'm going to reach out to people who I haven't spoken to for a while.
It's a very good way to use the time. I absolutely am with 2 young children. And for me, it's the same, every moment of my life, I just see what can we do to make use of this time. Steven, finally, I want to ask you before we end for the day, what is a question that you wish that interviewers would ask you, but you never get asked?
That's really great. I think maybe it would be, I don't think I've been asked this, but maybe something around the book question, like what's your favorite book? That would be an interesting one. Do you want to ask
me? Can you answer that for us? Yeah.
So it's a book that probably nobody's heard of. It was written by someone named Annie Dillard, Dillard, and she won the Pulitzer Prize for it, which in America is quite a big deal. It's like a well-known prize for books. But it's a book that I would say is quite a spiritual book, not in an overt religious way, but instead in a contemplative way. So it's about this woman named Annie, and she goes and lives in a cabin by a little river. And it's a book of her observations of nature and things that she's seeing. And it's very simple, but it's a real meditative type of book. So I've always enjoyed that book, and I recommended it to many people. So that would be probably the book that has stuck with me.
Thank you, Stephen, and I'm happy to share the link for the listeners today as well. So we'll definitely link that here. Thank you, Stephen. You've shared so much insights, and it's been really incredible just deep diving into some of those. It's been a real pleasure to have you on this conversation, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'll send you some links to some of the free things that people can access. And yeah, keep up the great work. It's a lot of behind the scenes. There's many tech issues. There's things that go on, to do this. So good on you for doing it, and keep sharing stories of people. I think it's really, really valuable.
I hope you will like it, share with your friends, and subscribe. We look forward to having more of these sessions. Till next time, I wish you all to keep caring beyond profits. Thank you.